more or less centered. Right.
We're back at you with gloves off, and
Right.
today we're going to be having a good show with Master of Eskrima, Jeff Finder. We're back at you with gloves off, and what we'll be talking about is how the Filipino martial arts entered into California, coming out of Stockton, California, and Jeff is very coming out of Stockton. We're hearing a lot of echo, and Jeff is very. But bear with us with the audio, folks. We've been having some trouble. This is the third time we're going to try it today, and we're going to do a good job of it. Jeff, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Tell us about how you got involved with the Eskrima in the martial arts, actually. Jeff, good afternoon.
My first involvement with the Eskrima was back in 1980, when I met someone named Bob Flores. I'd worked as an extra on Chuck Norris' movie An Eye for an Eye, and through a mutual friend, I met Bob. He taught me a little bit from Pikiti Tercia, and I was quite intrigued with the art. I was doing Kempo at the time, and 5 years later, I was competing at a Max Talons tournament in San Leandro. And Max is part of the Filipino community. He trained Cabales, among others. And there were demos during the lunch break. So while my teammates went and had lunch, I stayed to watch. And that's when I first saw Serrata. Blown away by just the savage intensity and the simplicity that I saw in the system. And it just won my heart. I've been with it ever since.
Folks, bear with us. We have a little bit of echo, but we're going to continue. That's a great story. I've been fortunate enough to have met you and met Ron Saturno, of course. All of you are masters and grandmasters in the Stockton area who have embraced me and Dancer Savat like a brother, and I want to thank you for that. And Vincent Cabales, and you have Carlito Bonjo, Art Gonzalez. Talk about the three. They always talk about the three greats of Stockton. Who were they?
Usually when people are referring to the big three in Stockton, it would have been Angel Cabales, Leo Giron, and Gilbert Tino. There are some that maybe would say Max Sarmiento. As part of the early mix, he was instrumental in helping Angel Cabales get his school up and running. I never had the pleasure of meeting the man. But the big three usually were Cabales Serrata and Leo Giron for Bahalana and Gilbert Tino, the Dequertis system.
Okay. What was the major differences to their approach, to their teaching, all that stuff? Because I think you grew up with all of them. What was the major difference?
Well, I wouldn't say I grew up with all of them. In a sense, I was a bit of a latecomer because I wasn't from Stockton. But Angel Cabales system, it's more for inside fighting, for holding the center line. It's very tight and compact. It does have elements of Largo Mano. It does have elements of Buno grappling. Does a lot of jiu-jitsu-like joint locking. But essentially, it's some might call it a dueling system of eskrima. It's very effective for one-on-one and particularly confined spaces. The Hiron system is a Largo Mano-based style. So they tend to use maybe more the female triangle, where Serrati emphasizes the male triangle.
Okay.
So they're going to step wider, be more evasive in their kind of movement. They do have a close range component. Most of these systems do have areas of overlap, but they'll be stronger or more specialized in one aspect or another.
Okay.
Gilbertino's system was the most underground of the three, and it wasn't something I really got more than a glimpse of during his lifetime. The Cuerda system is essentially drawn from, I believe, 19 systems that were at one point taught or practiced in the Stockton area. And Gilbertino, essentially, it's his synthesis of that. Now Art Gonzalez is the one who has carried on that tradition.
Yeah, and he's an excellent martial artist, and every single one of you all there is excellent, and each one of you all teach in a different format, and that's what I love training and learning from you all, because it's interesting in your all's approach. You know, each one of you, some of you make it a little bit more complex in nature, and some of you make it a lot more simpler in nature. And what I'm meaning by that is some make it more direct, and it's great to understand that and great to see that. And number one, I want to thank you all for that opportunity. Tell us what eskrima has done to many martial arts, because many martial arts now that never had a weapon base, as per se, have gone to seminars, and now you see stuff like Sinawali in martial arts that never had it, and now they're claiming it as their own, and so on and so forth. What do you think? What do you say? And what do you think about that?
I say there's a few layers to that question. There's a lot of schools that basically pick up a few Sinawali drills, maybe some single stick or knife, knife to knife type of drills, and they're satisfied and they stay with that. There are other systems that are perhaps more in depth in how they want to look at the art. For instance, there's a number of schools I know that have incorporated Kakles Los Pares, and they tend to be, very good at the more complex applications of that style, especially when it comes to things like joint locking and throwing, which was escrito, which was a specialty of that system. Recently, I was at an event for Ernie Reyes' 70th birthday down in San Jose, and his demo team went out there, and there were like 20 people doing really good serrata, which is something that one doesn't see too often outside of the Stockton FMA community, or perhaps out of the Anayan system in San Jose. So I really appreciate it when I see another school, taking on the art seriously and going into the depth of it, because even though something like serrata, for instance, is simple to learn on the surface, it's the timing, the details, developing habits of efficiency. Those take a long time. That takes work. But like I say, a lot of schools, they'll do double Sinawali, maybe a few single stick drills. It's good for their hand coordination. It's nice to see them have some interest in the art. I'd like to see them, actually take a more serious approach as well.
Understood. I mean, eskrima, Kali, Arnis have really, how can I say, modified or made an evolution, a complete change in a lot of martial arts. So I would say from the 80s to the present, or the 90s to the present, similar to what Thai boxing did. You had Van Damme come out in a movie, and then all of a sudden every Taekwondo school and Shotokan school was doing Thai boxing. It's something that influenced the martial arts, and to a good way it has, and many martial arts have done that and have impacted it, and it's good to see, like the way you depict it, the way you describe it. It's interesting. When I was over there with you all, and when I expressed our side of Savate, we met an old grandmaster, Ramiro Estalila. Tell me, and have you trained with him, cross-trained with him, talked to him? What do you see from him?
I've never been a student of Grandmaster Ramiro Estalila, but I've probably known him for over 20 years. I've done one or two seminars. He teaches a system of dos manos eskrima, and particularly a style called bombolia, which uses, it's like a staff, but it's a very thick, like almost like 2-3 inch, maybe even 4-inch thick piece of bamboo. It'd be like using like PVC plumbing pipe, drainage pipe.
Correct.
And it's a specialty of his system. And again, it's probably like about a 6 or 7 foot staff. So that's a rather interesting and unique approach that he has. The dos manos would be using a more conventional sized eskrima stick, say 28 to maybe 36 inches, but in a more standard, say, inch and a quarter type of a thickness.
Right. He's an interesting grandmaster and funny and has a lot of knowledge to share. And folks that are in that area, please go train with him. Seek him out. You will learn a lot.
He's down in Fresno. Yes.
He's down in Fresno. And everybody always says Jeff was the first fighter to go to compete in the Philippines of Cabales. Tell me about that experience, and tell me what you saw over there, and tell me how the eskrima competition has come over to the United States.
Well, I'm certainly the first finder to compete in the Philippines. I was involved in the first U.S. national tournament that Alfredo Bondalon threw in 1988. That was under Narafil auspices. That's the day that I fought against Arlen Sanford, and he, Mark Denny, and Eric Naus kind of huddled in the corner and said, another way to do it. So the Dog Brothers actually started that day. And after competing in that tournament, I received an invitation to be on the U.S. national team to go to Cebu in 1989. And I thought, what an incredible opportunity to go see, the Filipino martial arts in that, original native environment. I'd actually seen it when I was 11 years old. I was in the Philippines, and I got to see, groups training Sunday in Jose Rizal Park in Manila. So, I knew that the arts were being practiced there. A lot of people in the United States were of the impression that the arts were dead and forgotten in the Philippines. And I suspected that, they were still there, but secretive and hidden, which until recently was the case here in the United States as well. Or even within families, people might not know that other family members were practitioners. So, I went to the Philippines, 1989. I was the only short stick fighter in the tournament, and I think that caught a few people's attention. I remember one of the grandmasters in Doce Paris, Vicente Careen, actually pulled me aside at the tournament and said, "Your style is different than anyone else here." I wanted to know where it came from. I said, "I'm Grandmaster Angel Cabales. We have other Filipino grandmasters back in the U.S." And he didn't know who Angel was. He goes, "Who is his teacher?" And I said, "Felicissimo Dison." He goes, "Ah." And I didn't know at the time how many of the old grandmasters in the Philippines had trained at one time or another with Dison. I mean, that would include Totania Lustrissimo, Acoy Canetti, I believe, Vicente Careen, Benjamin Luna Lima. Perhaps during the war there was more collaboration, but a lot of these people would cross-train together. And so Serrata was recognized because it was Espada Udaga was a characteristic of Dison's system.
Right.
And that's what's That's what Angel carried on, was the espada, the daga.
Right, and I see that many folks, in the martial arts, as well as is they say you cannot cross-train outside the school. This is the only thing you can do. That type of mentality is archaic. It does not allow students to progress and to see and to recognize what's out there. What I've seen is the cross-training, the acceptance, the respect within the Filipino martial arts community in the Stockton area, which really amazes me. I mean, you see that in France. You see the professors, they respect all each other, and you can cross-train with one from the other. But that's a different story because it's more of a sport-related in Savant. But here in the martial arts, it's not. Sometimes you go to some schools in certain cities, and you know what? You cannot go talk to that instructor over there. Do not hang around with that other, that type of idiotic behavior that we see. And I don't see that with you all there. It's more of a family. We know, we respect each other. Yes, learn your basics, go train. Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. There's certainly a lot of respect for people coming in from other martial arts. I know, people like Grandmaster Angel Caballas enjoyed the fact that people who held rank in other systems came to him to enhance what they know. And so there's a lot of people in the Stockton area, maybe grew up training in other arts, like Goju Karate is big in Stockton, and then they come to the Filipino arts later. Between the different groups in Stockton, it was, for a long time, it was a very strong rivalry, and it still exists to this day to, a fair degree. So, people going to train from Angel to Hiron, or from Hiron to Angel, I think the instructors didn't always look so kindly on that. But bringing in people from other martial arts, I think there is a lot more openness in that area.
Right. And that's interesting because, Art Gonzalez holds a culture event of martial arts, which is awesome because he gathers folks from all over the place that come in there and actually train and cross-train. That is seldom seen, That is seldom seen.
True.
That is seldom seen. And that's awesome. I mean, Ed Parker did it, but he did it in a tournament base, and it was more like proof who was who and all that good stuff with the internationals. But you still had that separation of cross-training, even though he also cross-trained, and folks do not understand that all these grandmasters cross-train with other systems, with other grandmasters, and they'll sit down there and they'll talk about movement and defenses and so on and so forth, and they just do that naturally. And it's always been an ongoing thing. But here we're in a mentality like, wait a minute, my instructor does not permit that, and I think that's a shame.
Well, the cultural reason for it does make sense because there was a very strong need on a personal self-defense level. In other words, you look back through many cultures, historically, arts were kept secret because you didn't want your enemy to know how to fight you.
Correct.
And, within the Filipino community, there was certainly rivalry between people from different areas. You have to remember that the Philippines is one of the most diverse cultures on earth. I mean, linguistically, ethnically, and so there were, old country rivalries that came here. Plus, there was the need to defend against other ethnic groups. There was a lot of prejudice from the white community. There was competition with the Mexican community, for being farm labor and so forth. And so, the old Filipinos were not training for sport. They were training for, preserving their lives. And, if your students were leaving and going and sharing secrets somewhere else, that's, it goes back to the old ways of maybe teachers holding something back because they needed to keep an edge.
I understand. I mean, I understand. I understand that rationale and very well, you know, and you see it and you see it, but now with the modern commercialness of schools, it's adult. You still see that type of attitude, but not the need. Understand what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Now, when Angel was older, and this was around the time that I met him and trained, he said that he had hung up his sticks. He was no longer a challenge fighter, and so he was willing to teach everything. On a generational level, I think his early students had to deal with Angel when he was still a fighter, when he was still very fierce and protective about his art as a fighter. And so he trained very fast, tough fighters. As he got older, his art became more subtle. He became, I think, more in-depth in his ability to break down the information and to teach it. And as he put it, you know, in his later days, he says, I don't hold anything back now. I give it away. And it's because he wanted his art to be remembered and preserved and not forgotten.
I understood. Tell me now what you see with the Filipino arts in the near future. I know that you were very instrumental with forming the Gentlemen's Stick Fighting Coalition, which we've had twice state tournaments here in Texas. You know, everybody gave an input, everybody changed rules to modify the differences. And I know that you do a lot of training weapons and equipment for the martial arts. Show us some pieces if you have some.
Mostly, yeah. I make trainers for Spadi, Daga, and so forth. I'll start off with this little thing here, although we can see it. This is actually a copy of a knife I got from Sam Cox many years ago. It's called Sam Cox Bowie, Fighter number 3. This knife here is a variation from something that Sonny Umpad made for me many years ago. I just changed the guard a little bit so that it can defend against a stick as a catcher, protect the hands for training. My early works, like this piece here, it's kind of an Indonesian-influenced piece, were done basically hand cut and carved out on a router table, and finished by hand. Nowadays, I use a CNC machine to do my design work. Ceramics are popular. I make one with a slightly larger finger hole. I've had live blades from Indonesia that basically the hole is so small that for Western hands, people with thicker fingers, they get stuck. So mine's a little bit extra large around the hole there.
Understood. And you mentioned Sonny Umpad. Did you ever train with Sonny Umpad? Did you ever?
A little bit. I used to go and visit Sonny, and of course, when you visit Sonny, martial arts is what you talk about and do. And so we play a little bit. I know he taught me a lot of things. He taught me his doblicata centerline roll and his principles of leverage with his sticks. So that was his early material, and then later on, he was working on a Sikaran. This was about 1989 or so, 1990. After I came back from the Philippines, he was developing the Sikaran, or the kicking aspect of his system. And so I'd go over there, and he'd show me what he was doing. And I'd say, in Kempo, we do something similar but a little different. And I'd show him that, and then we'd throw kicks at each other. He was marvelously fluid and incredibly flexible. I miss Sonny. He was a good martial artist. I never was a formal student. I asked him at one point if we could arrange that. And he said, no, we just trade techniques. I was a little bit embarrassed, so I have to say I didn't come around as much for a while after that. But he's probably in the Filipino martial arts, after Angel Caballos, my second biggest influence.
Yes, he passed away some years back, and he was a treasure and a great innovator, and I never had a chance.
He's had influence on other people from Serrata. Wade Williams and Carlito Bonjoc both trained with Sonny. after Angel passed away.
Yeah. Apart from those, who else influenced you, or who else did you see caught your attention from the Filipinos that were there, the older generations?
There's a certain generic similarity in all of this. Hortensio Navalis from the island of Panay, and even though his style used a longer stick, they used the same kind of a locking position that Angel Cabales uses in Serrata. And I introduced myself to him at the 1989 championships. I said, "Oh, Cabales, Navalis, you're from Panay, he's from Panay." So I was kind of an honorary member of this club during the tournament there.
That's interesting.
And it was the similarity of how he held the guard position that was what initially caught my eye. And of course, the Illustrissimo system is, I know that some of the Illustrissimo people don't like to hear this, but it's very similar in aspects to Serrata, and there is that common link where both Illustrissimo and Cabales trained with Felicissimo di Song. One of the stories I heard, I don't remember, it was from one of the old Filipinos, is in the old days they would all do single stick together. They would ball train double stick together. They would do knife training together. When it came to Espada y Daga, nobody wanted to train with Dison because he was just that good at that part of the art. And so obviously, he had a strong influence on an entire generation of grandmasters that came up. I had heard that Dison had died during the war, but actually I think he was probably alive at least into the 1970s. So I think that was part of the loss of contact between immigrants into this country versus the Filipinos who remained behind.
Understood. Understood. What do you see in the future with the Filipino martial arts? You see the styles be preserved individually, or do you see a lot more mixture and cross-training? Do you see a lot? What do you see?
I do see a lot of mixture and cross-training. There are certain styles that I see as having a really good base with an organization, and those styles will continue strong. The Doce Pares people, particularly here on the West Coast, Cacoy's lineage and Doce Pares, I think they'll have a good presence for a long time. Olintawak has been gaining popularity in recent years, both in Los Angeles and up here in the Bay Area, and I think that's a style that's going to be very popular for a while. Serrata is still pretty much a regional system centered around Stockton. It's very strong there, but there hasn't been a lot of outgrowth. In terms of other schools, I see a lot of blending going on, particularly schools that, maybe they bring in a lot of guest instructors, say from the Inosanto lineage, or, perhaps, they'll do some Inosanto and some Sayak. The old Filipinos had a term, and which was spaghetti eskrima. And that was people that would learn a little of this and a little of that, and then they'd sort of pick and choose and put things together. And the criticism of that approach is that each system of Filipino martial arts has its own integral sense of timing. And if you're trying to do, Serrata with timing from, say, Villabria's system, perhaps it doesn't work quite as well, and vice versa. So the idea was, if you learn one system and you really understand it, and then you learn something else, now you know the difference between this and that, and you can play them off of each other. But with a lot of these newer systems, I don't know if the internal logic is as well developed at this point. I think it takes someone with a lot of experience and insight to, be able to apply, things from different systems in a way that logically connects, if that makes sense.
No, you're absolutely correct. And that right there is something that I've always said to my students and others. get basics down, understand the fundamentals, and once you have a good grasp, learn. But if you just start jumping around, picking and doing, and that goes throughout, that spaghetti mentality goes through any martial art. I see folks that have 9 months into martial arts opening up schools, and they're doing 2 months of kickboxing here and a month of boxing here, and now they did judo now, they did a seminar with Kali here, and they're out there teaching this mishmash, and it's not working, kind of, sort of, and I'm an executive chef, and I always put this terminology, and I tell folks this, and I go, what's your best Chinese dish that you like? And people will say, muy gu bai pan or what have you. And I say, what's your best Italian dish that you like? And they'll say something Alfredo, right? What's your best Cajun? And they'll say gumbo. And what's your best Mexican? They'll say enchiladas. And I say, okay, if I get all that and throw it together in a pot and mix it up and just get a spoonful of it and throw it on your plate, will you eat it? They said no. Well, that's exactly what happens with the martial arts. Some martial arts will not mix. And contrary to popular thinking is that everything mixes and motion is motion and all this other stuff. No, it's not. There's certain little tweaks and turns and logics and little explanations that one has to be brought up and taught or assimilated, right?
Absolutely. I've been doing serrata now for over 30 years. And, every time I work on the fundamentals, the thing about fundamentals is you have to understand the concept and how everything links. The movement itself is just an expression of the concept. Angel was really big on efficiency. So, for instance, every move he did should be setting up the next move. It shouldn't be you do a move, then go to the setup, and then do the next move. But the continuity of flow was very logical. And even though the system is simple, if you understand it, it's like looking at a map and saying, I can get from, say, Los Angeles to San Francisco. I can take a plane, I can take a train, I can drive a car, I can take a boat. There's a lot of ways to do it, but you understand how to make those connections. And the more I study serrata, the more the little details, the really fine points become important. And people who've only done it for a year or two, they might be like just really physical at practicing the art. But as we get older, we're maybe not as we don't have as much energy. We might not have the same strength we did when we were younger. But by being more efficient and by learning to read subtle nuances in our opponent, because we understand efficiency, that gives us advantages, for instance, in timing, which is probably one of the more critical elements.
You're absolutely correct. We get that with savate all the time. People say, oh, it's just French Taekwondo or French Karate or what have you. It's a totally different thing. It's a total different nuance in the way you move and so on and so forth. And people say, no, kicking is kicking. No, it's not. And you were the first one that mentioned that. And you told me, well, you're doing things a little bit slightly different. I'm paying attention to you. And you're absolutely correct. Now, can savate and boxe française mix? Yes, because they come from the same area, the same kind of melting pot, which they kind of grew up out of. They came out of. The same thing happens with the Filipino arts. Yes, you can cross train with them, but once you have a basics, and you're absolutely totally correct, Master Jeffry.
One of the big reasons I wanted to go to the Philippines was it's a learning experience, and I know that when I'm in a tournament, particularly one that has the prestige of an international flavor, it's not like practicing with your regular training partners. These people are not cooperative. And so it was a chance for me to find out what worked, what didn't work, what was it that I needed to work on when I got home. And so my attitude was, it didn't matter if I won or lost, as long as I learned something. I would rather lose and learn than win and have nothing except a trophy to bring home.
No,
so I was actually seeking knowledge in the competition.
No, you're absolutely correct, because competition is is one from within. And pugilistic type of competition, which is like eskrima is in boxing, so on and so forth, it's you yourself that's out there by yourself. It's not a team, even though you might belong to a team, but it's not a team. It's not a whole, there's a lot of errors that can occur and people start pointing fingers. No, this is you yourself. You're every time you go out there and face somebody else, you're going to learn. I learned, when I fought. And that is very... And you learn every time, your mistakes that you're doing, stuff that you're doing. And you all sometimes in the ring, especially mine, I was paying attention to my corners. Basically, my corners were the ones that were telling me how to win because they were seeing the mistakes the other person was doing. And so it makes you a little bit more open to criticism, if you want to put it that way, and the need to understand what we need to work on. And you're correct. Here's one. What do you tell the new martial artist that's coming of age? What counsels do you give them?
Train consistently and don't quit. I've known people who maybe would go 3 or 4 days, they wouldn't train, and then they would push themselves to exhaustion, trying to catch up before a weekly lesson with an instructor. And that really doesn't work well that way. It's basically the consistency of developing the habits. And, I tell people, if you only have 15 minutes a day, maybe you only have 5 minutes here or there, find ways to make things work. When I'm sitting at a red light in my car, I'll practice going around the steering wheel with my hands, just to have a flow going, maybe poking holes, going eye shots through the spokes in the wheel. It's just, to me, it's an opportunity to train as opposed to being dead time.
No, you're correct. I want to thank you, Master Jeffry Finder, for coming on the show today and expressing your love for the Filipino martial arts and the martial arts in general. And we will see you soon. And
Paul, thank you. It was an honor and a privilege, to be on here. Thank you for inviting me, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. You be safe, my friend.
Thank you.
Till next time, here at Gloves Off.